just living their lives, working, traveling, waiting, helping. None of them expected danger, yet death found them in the most ordinary places. No warning, no reason, just moments that turned fatal in seconds. These are 6 innocent people who never saw their last moments coming. It was March 8, 2017, in Stockton, California, along a quiet stretch of Charter Way. The area was mostly industrial, old warehouses, repair shops, and narrow sidewalks lined with flickering street lights. Few people walked there at night unless they had to. Rodolfo Rudy Jimenez was the kind of man people in his neighborhood counted on. At 42, he had worked most of his life fixing engines at a small auto repair shop near Charter Way. His days started early and ended late, but he rarely took a break. He picked up every extra job he could, taking weekend repairs or side work whenever someone called. Rudy lived with his wife and teenage daughter in a small duplex on the south side of the city. It wasn't much, but he managed to keep the bills paid and food on the table through steady work. The family lived modestly, careful with spending, and used to getting by with what they had. That month, his daughter had been accepted into a private high school, something he was proud of, but also nervous about. The tuition deadline was coming up, and he was short on money. He didn't want her to miss the chance, so he borrowed $300 from a coworker and promised to pay it back after his tax refund came through. That Wednesday night, the shop closed later than usual. The other mechanics left one by one, and Rudy stayed to finish a brake replacement that couldn't wait until morning. He washed his hands at the sink, changed out of his work shirt, and walked down the block to a payday loan store to collect the money. The cashier remembered him being polite and thanking her twice before leaving. It was already dark when he stepped outside. The air smelled faintly of exhaust and fried food from the nearby taco stand. Rudy started his walk home, barely a mile, but the route wasn't ideal. The sidewalks along that stretch were uneven, with weeds pushing through the cracks. A few streetlights flickered weakly over old warehouses. He kept his jacket zipped and the envelope tucked inside, planning to hand it to his wife as soon as he got home. Taking the bus would have cost a few extra dollars, and he didn't want to waste anything meant for his daughter's school. Around 9:40 p.m., workers from the taco stand noticed 2 men standing near a dumpster, smoking. They didn't think much of it until Rudy walked past. One of the workers later reported hearing a brief exchange, followed by a sharp yell. The sound came from the alley between the warehouse and an auto parts lot. Another man who had been waiting for a ride saw Rudy step backward and raise an arm, as if to push someone away. A quick motion crossed between them, too fast to identify, before both attackers fled. The struggle couldn't have lasted more than half a minute. When things went quiet again, a delivery driver pulled over after noticing a man lying near the curb. He got out and called out twice. Rudy was on his side, breathing hard but shallow. The white envelope was torn open in his hand, the cash gone. His glasses were a few feet away, one lens cracked. The driver tried to ask if he could hear him, but Rudy only moved his lips once before going still. Police arrived within minutes, but the 2 men had already fled. Detectives later determined it was a street robbery that turned fatal and ended within seconds. Rudy was pronounced dead from a single stab wound to the chest. The suspects were never found. His family continued to press for answers, but the investigation produced no leads. It was September 12, 2019, on a rural highway in Manitoba. A late-night regional coach service moved west toward Saskatoon, crossing flat country, long distances, and stretches of road where lights from other vehicles could vanish for miles. Celine Meyer, 33, worked as a dental assistant in a clinic outside Winnipeg. She had been married for 4 years and was in the early stages of pregnancy. Friends said she often talked about moving to a quieter town once the baby arrived. That plan changed after she discovered her husband's affair the week before. Wanting time away, she packed a small bag and decided to stay with her sister in Saskatchewan. She booked a late-night charter-style coach ticket through a regional operator's app and chose a seat near the back for the long ride west. The bus left shortly after 10 p.m., carrying a small group of travelers. The interior lights stayed low, while most listened to music or tried to sleep. Celine kept her phone in her lap, checking messages she didn't answer. The air smelled faintly of diesel and fabric cleaner, and the steady vibration of the road made the windows hum. At a brief roadside stop around midnight, a man boarded carrying a small duffel bag. Witnesses later said his clothes looked wrinkled and his movements uneven, as if he hadn't slept in days. He scanned a digital ticket on his phone before choosing a seat beside Celine, even though several empty rows were open. By that hour, only a handful of passengers remained awake, scattered through the coach. Nothing about the moment drew attention. The bus pulled back onto the highway, its headlights cutting across open farmland. A few miles later, some passengers noticed faint movement from the rear seats, rustling that started, stopped, then started again. The driver glanced once in the mirror, but saw nothing unusual. Then, near mile 43, several riders heard a sudden outburst, followed by shouting. 2 witnesses later said the man suddenly drew a knife from his bag and attacked her before the driver could pull over. Chaos spread through the aisle. People rushed toward the front while the driver radioed for help and locked the doors. A passenger with medical training tried to reach the back of the bus, but stopped after seeing the extent of the injuries. When police and paramedics arrived, the interior lights were still flickering from the sudden stop. Officers detained the attacker without resistance near the rear seats. Celine was found unresponsive, but with a faint pulse. Paramedics began chest compressions inside the bus before moving her outside to a stretcher. She was airlifted by helicopter to the nearest regional hospital, arriving shortly after 1 a.m. Medical staff continued resuscitation efforts for several minutes, but her injuries were too severe. She was pronounced dead at 1:26 a.m. The attacker was detained at the scene and later committed to a psychiatric hospital after being found unfit for trial. Investigators confirmed Celine had no prior connection to him and that he had a documented history of psychiatric admissions in another province. The section of highway remained closed until dawn for evidence collection. By morning, the coach company released a short online statement acknowledging the fatality and suspending the route for internal review. Celine's family arrived from Winnipeg to identify her belongings. Her husband came later, silent through most of the process. Records showed he had tried calling her phone several times that night. It was May 4th, 2017, in Aurora, Colorado. The neighborhood sat on the east side of the city, rows of small homes with trimmed lawns and mailboxes painted by kids. People there knew each other by name. It was the kind of place where neighbors waved at passing cars and helped shovel snow in winter. Lydia Porter, 42, had lived on the block for nearly a decade. A widow for several years, she worked as an administrative clerk at a local elementary school, keeping track of attendance and student records. Co-workers described her as steady and dependable, someone who rarely missed a day of work. Her home had a warm reputation in the neighborhood. She often brought cookies to new residents and watered the plants of anyone away for the weekend. That Thursday was one she had been looking forward to. Her daughter and young grandson were driving in from Fort Collins for a short visit. Lydia spent the morning tidying the house, baking a batch of muffins, and setting out fresh towels in the guest room. When the afternoon came, she ran a quick errand before returning home to wait for them. But as she pulled into her driveway, a visiting pickup truck was parked halfway across the entrance. She parked at an angle and left the engine running while she went next door to ask the neighbor to move it. Next door lived Ethan Brandt, 27, who had moved back in with his mother a month earlier after finishing a correctional program for minor offenses. He had been drinking since morning, frustrated after learning he hadn't been hired for a warehouse job. The truck in Lydia's driveway belonged to a friend who had stopped by to see him. The friend had already left a few minutes earlier, leaving the truck parked halfway across Lydia's driveway. Neighbors later said the first sound they noticed was calm conversation. Lydia stood at the doorway speaking with him, her voice steady at first. Then it rose without warning. A neighbor across the street saw her step back with one hand raised, as if trying to keep distance. Brandt appeared restless, pacing near the doorway before turning inside the house. Moments later, he came out holding a handgun. Someone shouted from a porch, but the warning came too late. A single shot cut through the quiet street, echoing off the garages. Lydia fell near the edge of her driveway. The car's engine was still running, her headlights spilling across the pavement. Police arrived within minutes, after several 911 calls from nearby homes. Officers found Brandt sitting on his porch, the weapon beside him. He was taken into custody without resistance. Paramedics tried to stabilize Lydia, but the wound to her upper chest was fatal. She was pronounced dead at the scene. By dusk, yellow tape stretched across the yard while investigators gathered evidence. Brandt was later charged with second-degree murder and found mentally unfit to stand trial. He was transferred to a state psychiatric facility for long-term treatment. That evening, Lydia's daughter arrived from Fort Collins after learning what had happened. Neighbors met her outside, still gathered behind the police tape. Inside the house, the table was already set with the muffins Lydia had baked earlier, ready for the visit that never took place. It was August 23, 2019, in Melbourne. The supermarket sat near a busy tram stop known for its late evening crowds and fluorescent lights that stayed on past midnight. Friday rush hour brought the usual line of shoppers carrying quick dinners, milk, and bread. Most were tired from work, eager to get home before the next cold front moved in. Ava Robinson, 28, had been working part-time at the grocery store for 3 years. She was a single mother, raising her 4-year-old daughter in a small rental flat above a laundromat a few blocks away. Her mother helped with childcare during early shifts, and in the evenings, a neighbor watched the little girl until Ava got home. It wasn't ideal, but it kept things steady. Her week revolved around long hours and short paydays. Most mornings started before sunrise, packing snacks for her daughter and catching the first tram into work. She rarely took days off, afraid of losing the few extra hours that helped cover rent. Co-workers said she was patient and calm, the kind of cashier who remembered regular customers by what they usually bought. That Friday was her 6th day straight on shift. The store manager asked her to stay late after another employee called in sick, and she agreed. Before clocking in, she texted her neighbor to say she'd be home later than usual and reminded her to keep her daughter's favorite blanket by the bed. By 6:30 p.m., Ava was managing the only open express lane. The line stretched past the candy racks, the rhythm of scanners and checkout beeps filling the background. Security footage later showed her uniform neat, hair tied back, and posture straight as she handled each transaction with quiet focus. Nothing about her expression hinted at what would follow. At 6:47 p.m., a couple entered the store. Witnesses later recalled that they were already arguing by the time they passed the produce section. The woman's voice was shaky, the man's low but sharp. Several shoppers turned their heads as the two moved down the aisles. One man remembered hearing the words phone and lying, but couldn't tell who said them. When the couple reached Ava's register, the woman placed a few items on the counter: bread, bottled water, and a pack of tissues. Her hands trembled as she pulled money from her wallet. The man stood several feet behind her, arms crossed, watching closely. Footage later showed the woman leaning slightly toward Ava while handing over cash, saying something under her breath that wasn't captured on audio. Ava paused, glanced up, and gave a small nod before starting to bag the items. The man raised his voice. He accused her of hiding something, pointing toward the counter. Ava looked up briefly, keeping her hand near the register. The woman tried to calm him, but he turned and walked quickly toward the exit, shouting as he left. For a few seconds, the store went still, except for the faint hum of the coolers. 3 minutes later, the man came back. This time, his right hand was tucked inside his jacket. He moved straight toward the express lane. Witnesses near the self-checkout area said Ava stepped forward slightly, as if to block his path. The woman she'd been ringing up took a step back, clutching her bag. Security footage caught the man raising a small handgun. Ava's motion blurred in the frame as she reached toward the woman. 2 sharp cracks followed, echoing against the glass doors. Panic spread instantly. Shoppers ducked behind aisles or dropped to the floor. The man ran out toward the parking lot, disappearing into traffic before anyone could see which direction he went. A store employee triggered the alarm and locked the entrance. When police arrived minutes later, they found Ava behind the counter with 2 gunshot wounds, one to the shoulder and one to the chest. Paramedics performed CPR and moved her to a stretcher, but she went into cardiac arrest inside the ambulance and was pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital. Police traced the suspect's vehicle using security footage from nearby businesses. The car was found abandoned less than a mile from the store later that evening, leading to his arrest before midnight. Investigators confirmed the attack had stemmed from a domestic dispute between him and the woman in line. He was later convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 20 years. It was October 21st, 2015, in Leeds. The evening had started with steady rain that left the pavement slick and reflective under the streetlights. Students hurried home, jackets pulled tight, umbrellas angled against the wind. Chloe Reed, 19, was among them. A first-year architecture student, she was known for her precision and her habit of staying late to perfect every line in her drawings. Professors described her as bright and self-driven, the kind of student who asked questions that lingered after class. She volunteered at the university's sustainability group, helping design low-cost model shelters for local housing charities. Friends said she rarely missed an event, even when deadlines were tight. Her schedule was demanding, but she managed it well. Most days started with early lectures and ended with long evenings at the library, where she spread her sketch pads and laptop across a corner table. She shared a small apartment with 2 classmates who often went home before her, leaving her to lock up after midnight. The walk from campus to her bus stop was familiar, the same route she'd taken since the start of term. That Thursday, a drafting project deadline kept her past 10 o'clock. The rain outside had turned steady by the time she left, tapping against the tall windows of the studio. When she reached the bus stop, CCTV later showed her checking the schedule and glancing down the road. The board showed the next bus due at 11:02 p.m. CTV captured her standing under the shelter, checking her phone as rain built on the pavement. When the bus finally arrived at 11:05, she was still crossing from the opposite side of the street. The camera recorded its taillights pulling away while she stood near the curb. Investigators later concluded she must have decided to walk the 2 miles home rather than wait for the next bus. The route followed residential blocks and a narrow stretch beside the canal, quiet, familiar, and usually safe. At 11:27 p.m., a convenience store camera picked her up passing a parked car. In the next frame, a shadow moved near the edge of the lot. Analysts later noted that the figure appeared to step forward just as Chloe reached the corner. Seconds later, the image cut out when the camera panned back toward the road. 2 cyclists passing by around 11:30 noticed her umbrella lying open on the sidewalk, turning slightly in the wind. A canvas bag was nearby, one strap torn, its contents scattered: sketchbook, bus pass, and a half-full water bottle. They slowed but saw no one nearby and continued home, assuming someone else had already stopped to help. At 11:46, a passing motorist reported seeing a phone screen glowing faintly near the canal railing. The call was logged, but with no confirmed sighting of anyone in danger. Patrols were not dispatched until morning. Her phone's GPS pinged once more at 11:47 before going dark. When she failed to return home overnight, her roommates contacted university security, and police began a formal search at first light. By morning, a search team recovered the umbrella and bag, but found no trace of Chloe. The canal was partially drained the next day for investigation, though heavy rain slowed progress. A week later, her body was discovered several miles downstream, caught against a locked gate. Investigators confirmed she had drowned after sustaining blunt force injuries consistent with an assault. The vehicle seen leaving the area was traced to a 34-year-old man with prior assault charges. He was arrested 2 months later and convicted of murder after forensic evidence linked him to the scene. The case was officially closed the following year. It was December 24, 2018, in Alberta, Canada, when a steady snow began to fall over the foothills west of Calgary. The temperature hovered around 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and the wind carried thin sheets of powder across the open highway. Most drivers had already cleared the route, rushing to make it home for the holidays before the next storm hit. George Clark, 38, was a freight driver known for keeping his rig spotless and his schedule tight. He had spent the past week delivering supplies to small towns near Banff and Canmore, working longer hours than usual. His company had handed out small holiday bonuses that morning, and George planned to use the extra money to treat his family. In the passenger seat were 3 wrapped gifts: a toy truck for his son, a scarf for his daughter, and a wristwatch for his wife. He'd bought them from roadside shops along the route. Other drivers later said George had been in high spirits that week, talking non-stop about Christmas and how he couldn't wait to get home before midnight. It was the longest stretch he'd spent away from his family that year, and finishing this run meant he'd finally get a few quiet days at home. George left the last drop site just before dusk, hoping to reach Calgary by midnight. The snow thickened, but he stayed steady behind the wheel, listening to Christmas songs on the radio. Dashcam footage later showed an empty stretch of highway lined with spruce trees until he slowed near a lone figure walking along the shoulder. A woman was on the roadside, head down, clutching a canvas bag and wearing no coat. George rolled down the window. She said her car had broken down and asked for a ride to the next town. He nodded, moved the gifts aside, and unlocked the door. She introduced herself only as Emily. She mentioned that her phone battery had died hours earlier, unaware that the old account still transmitted its last location through the tracking app her ex-partner controlled. For about 15 minutes, the dashcam recorded short, cautious conversation mixed with the hum of the heater. Emily's answers were brief, her voice low and uneasy. She asked several times if the next town had a public phone. Investigators later learned that Emily's ex-partner had been tracking her location through a phone app linked to her old account. That afternoon, he had violated a restraining order and driven toward the foothills after seeing her signal move west of Banff. Just before 7 p.m., headlights appeared behind George's truck, fast and weaving. The sedan stayed close, flashing its lights. George kept to his lane, assuming it was an impatient driver, until Emily's tone shifted and she told him not to stop. The car edged closer each time he slowed, crossing the center line as if to block him from pulling ahead. She realized what he wanted. He was trying to force the truck to the shoulder. Moments later, the sedan lunged toward his lane, pushing him toward the embankment. The right tires hit soft snow. The truck's weight shifted, and it rolled once before coming to rest on its side in a shallow ditch. Emergency responders found the wreck after a passing motorist noticed hazard lights flashing through the snow. The engine was still running when they arrived. George had suffered a massive chest injury from the steering column and died instantly. Emily was gone when crews checked the cab, but footprints led toward the tree line. She was later found at a nearby ranger station, treated for frostbite and shock, and gave investigators a full statement describing her flight from her ex-partner and the moments before the crash. The other vehicle had been abandoned less than 2 miles away, its front end crushed in a drainage gully. Tire fragments and paint transfer on George's truck matched the sedan, registered to Emily's ex-partner. Rangers found him later that night, disoriented and suffering from hypothermia. Investigators recovered George's dash cam from beneath the driver's seat. The dash cam, torn loose during the rollover, was later recovered from beneath the driver's seat. The final seconds captured a faint voice from the passenger side expressing gratitude just before the headlights filled the frame and the recording went dark. When police returned his belongings, George's wife quietly opened the recovered cab. The 3 gifts were still there, neatly wrapped and untouched. The funeral was held the week after New Year's, attended by co-workers, drivers, and neighbors who had known George for years. His employer placed a reflective marker near milepost 72 in his memory, a small sign along a frozen Alberta road marking where a man stopped to help and never made it home for Christmas. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the video? Click more